Hi everyone. For my presentation, I will be walking you through the concept of my game called War of Mounts Ventus Gaia. Without further ado, let's get started. This is my high concept of the game. War of Mounts Gaia and Ventus is based on a fantasy tactical RPG war game. This is where players will be using their units, riding creatures to advance within the world of Mythorelia. Summon and ride creatures to boost your army through land, sea, and sky to the abyss for adventuring and conquering the world. War of Mounts and Gaia and Ventus is mainly about a story of summoning creatures and battling the demon lord Avivian, who is trying to destroy the land of Mythorelia. The player's objective is to win wars by beating opposing armies in order to conquer their lands while obtaining orbs to power up the creatures and characters in battle. By having the modular system in the gameplay, it will make the strategy critical to the game in a whole new way. Players use orbs to summon creatures, and without them, their characters will return to normal stats. Crystals can help the players gain magical abilities to do various things like healing or stronger attacks depending on the chosen class and mounts. However, a player's character will go back to normal if he or she does not maintain CP crystal points, which is obtained by defeating enemies. The ultimate goal that the players must complete the story level and obtain a legendary sword that hides within their land called the Sword of Mythorelia, which will allow the characters to defeat the demon lord that brings calamity. One of the key features is the combat system with the paper sheet that will have a real-time strategy with the paper map as a board. This is where the players will be moved after rolling the dice and deciding where they want to advance their forces. During the dice move, players can move depending on their chosen mounts, discover different outcomes like finding chests, being trapped by a monster, or finding an exit. This will be part of the storytelling. Spells and summoning can be cast during certain circumstances. Besides combat mode, players can cast fire spells or use them to torch an item, he or she in dark areas. Summon creatures can gain some abilities depending on their type, with being to move on certain turns in the game world. Weaponry boosting system. Weaponry spells summoning with crystal points. While players are able to gain experience points for their characters, weapons and other abilities will enhance their advance in the game. Any treasure hunt is supposed to help players gain more experience points and rare items that can be found in certain various areas in the game, like mining or secret areas of the map. Guilds will be added sometime later in the future once players progress the game. Most important, character sheets that will be in part 2. There are 5 main units typed with their special creatures. Each player will have a sheet to keep track of their characters. There are 5 characters to play in the game, each with different creatures mount depending on the units chosen. So we got horse unit, Pegasus, wyvern, and boars and serpent. This is the part where players will take part of the story. Leader must lead the game as a game master to decide the outcome. On the campaign setting, this is the example of the story that's going to be in the core booklet. This is where players are to build and interact towards the outcome of the story in the story. An indirect guide shows that if the player lands on a certain range of space, an event will trigger. The parenthesis shows what event will trigger once the player lands on that space on the board. For example, like on range 6 to 10, they got ambushed by spiders. But it depends on the board. Okay, campaign story, part 1. Okay, The War of Mounts and Gaia Ventus game will have the stories and chapters, of the scenario gameplay. However, this game was intended to be four chapters since this is a prototype. The main theme of the game is about war between good and evil, where the demon lord Abyssinian's goal is to eliminate the 4 playable characters that is chosen and destined to journey far in the lands with the creatures that represents the houses of the player's kingdom. Players have the options to place some status on their characters like noble or commoner and come up with additional background story which gives the player more choices. However, they cannot change the creature type since the creature is set in the game. Players can only level up, increase power, and have set of movements of the creature to be mounted on. Creatures is the main game role for summoning and tactical purposes. Players must still follow the game rules even if there's no game master. Players are the game master, and they must follow the story process in order to journey in Mythoridia. And of course, right here is my campaign story part 2, the backstory. In the first scenario at the beginning of the chapters, a setting will be taking place by the hook. After the hook of the event takes place, the player has to make a choice to the trigger outcome. Once the trigger is activated, the players will begin to do the objective by completing it in order to move on to the next scenarios within the chapter. Players will work together as a team and each will take turns to be part of the story since they are their own game master. However, one must be a leader and read the entire story. If the leader needs rest, then the next player who volunteers can be the leader and storyteller. Both words are the actions for the players to choose, and he or she must agree together. But if the votes are odd, then the leader will make the final call. There is more than one NPC included in the story to make the world feel lively, and the players can interact with the NPC in various ways, like buying items or accepting quests. Also, there will be outcomes list of choices to make the guide the players. If he or she to choose one choice, then they must read the outcome of the events. Then it's going to happen since it's part of the rules for the mechanics. There are 3 chapters. Actually, there are 4 chapters since this is a prototype. Excuse me. And this is my campaign board. That is from my prototype game earlier. That was, it has the little symbols and stuff, and this one here is with the tokens. This is shows chapter 2 of the castle. Tokens is included. Well, I don't have the core booklet since it's not there in the picture, but the dice is there along with the tokens. Okay, this is the characters overview. Each character have their own unique abilities, actions, and movement in the game. Characters may have some advantages and disadvantages, but if the players work together as a team and learn to strategize, the characters recourse can complete the game objective. Here's an example about the advantage of the characters with their mounts. Knights are balanced characters, however, their disadvantage is they do not have magic, so they're mainly physical attackers. Players are plane travelers, but they can't oh, certain players are plane travelers, but they can't go up the mountains. Unlike Pegasus or Wyverns, may have some well-rounded advantages of the movement. But if the scenario of a scene or weather has some disturbance, it may weaken the character's movement and combat. It is optional for players to choose the necessity of the character, like barbarian, elf, to spice up the imagination. All starting characters are start at level 1, and health points are set to 800. Okay, so here's part 2 of my character overview. Here's my knight. They are protectors, and of course they ride the horse. They are capable to move freely in the terrains, but is weakened when traveling over swamps, forests, and hills and rivers. Knights are able to use swords, lance, and bows. Special ability is Rally Cavalry, which boosts their stats when near another unit. And they are all around stance, Master of None, weaker movement on certain terrains. And the next one will be Barbarian. There's Scourge the land that terrors the innocents along with their giant boars. Giant boars have equal movements on all terrains except oceans and mountains. However, they have the lowest movement out of the characters. They use axe, lances, and bows. Their special ability is Prideful Scourge, boosts their power when low on stamina. And of course, it boosts offensive and defensive power. Suffers from very low magical resistance. And then here's my other character overview, part 3. Here's the Valkyrie, warrior maidens that are winged horses. Pegasus units have highest movement, can travel over the terrains due to their flight capabilities. Valkyries uses lances, light magic, healing. Their special ability is Valkyrie Blessing, releases an AoE area effect that heals all allies and units within range for 7 HP. Of course, they have the highest movement. They can go any terrains. Any terrains that does not of course I think they're just weak of dark magic and arrows. Special ability can charge at any time. Next one will be the Dragoons and Wyverns. Knights that have tamed dragons and having mastered dark magic. Share the movement range of the horses but can travel any turns like the Pegasus. Dragoon uses swords, axes, and dark magic. Their special ability is Dragonic Range. Special ability of the Wyvern unleashes an AoE effect that damages all enemies for 8 HP. Combines movement of the horses and Pegasus, second strongest attack, and defensive of all character. Doesn't benefit from the turn's bonuses, weak to light magic and arrows. Special ability as long as charge of time. And this one here, there is no image at this time, but these are the Shamans and Serpent. Master of Magic that travels on the backs of the giant snakes and other serpent reptiles. Serpents can travel over water, terrains like oceans and swamp easily. However, their movement is weaker on land. Serpents uses light, dark, healing magic. Their special ability is Natural Gifts. Double the turn's bonuses for all allies. Strong in both physical and magical defense. Can travel over water, swamps with ease. Lower movement on the land. Low offensive power. So this is a bonus character, but it will make the gameplay fulfilling in the combat. Okay, combat system. The combat system is a tactical turn-based system. Players may be given a choice which order the players can go first, or do the dice method to see the turn order. Once players are in the combat setting, they are to use the combat mat to have the battle scene. Players are to use the D12 dice to move through the game. If the player lands on the square, on the enemy square, players are to battle the enemies. If there's two players are landed on the next to each other facing the same enemy, they can fight together. In the battle, players are to determine the stats of the characters, creatures, and enemy stats. A hand booklet of variety enemies status is provided in the rules in the book. Players will take one first fight, then the player 2 will follow. Once the enemies are defeated, players are to share items within the same inventory and each gets experience points equally. Players are to use the D12 to determine the outcome of the fight. Okay, this is the combat system. We got ambush. It will set the players with one turn loss automatically. And of course, they get hit on a certain amount of points from the enemies, depending on the outcome of the chance of the dice. Chance difficulty. If players are to land on the weaken their stats, it can be either make the player lose one turn or lose a fixed amount of health, dodge rolls. By using the dice, players may be able to take advantage to avoid enemies' attack rolls, range and melee with critical hits. Attack rolls are automatically in the beginning for each players to roll the dice first. If the dice rolls on a certain number, like 3, then the enemies will get hit for 3 points. As for the critical points, it is a bonus turn to hit the enemies with extra damage. Spells and summon. Casting time for spells and summon can take 2 lost turns, but the attack is greater than the regular attack. Players must use the D20 dice to determine the damage. Healing and item usage can be used during the player's phase. Players must roll D12 dice for mid magic healing or item as well. D20 for high as for the magic and items. We got health and defense points. Players may regain health in battle, but certain healing spells or items must be obtained. Roll D12 or 20 to determine the health recovery. On the combat system, this is where players will have to use the dice to determine the outcome of damage outcome. Okay, regular battle. Okay, for the regular battle, this is where players will have to see the story event first to determine if he or she lands on a certain range to see if it's ambush or regular battle. If it's an ambush attack, the monster goes first to attack the player. Player must roll, I think it was a D12, but I'll just say D20, to determine the monster's attack and amount of damage dealt. If the player are involved, if 2 players are involved, they must determine who the monster is going to attack first. Then both players must roll D20 to see who's going to get the damage first. The highest number is miss, and the lowest is hit. If the player is alone battling a monster, the player must flip the coin and call heads and tails. If the coin flips on the player's chosen side, the attack will miss. Magic Spells the summon takes 2 turns to cast. I believe I did repeat that on the last slide. I won't. I'm just going to move forward on the next one. If the player was to battle alone and cast magic, the player will be attacking the monster will be attacking the players 2 times. Player must roll D20 to hit or miss. The 2-player battle mechanic can still apply for a 5-player, and it must be determined the turn order by the leader. Boss battles usually takes longer since there is certain turn order that will help the players achieve the victory. And then right here is the turn order. Actually, whenever the player lands on the space, and that's when they get a battle scene. This one here that the picture shown is a solo battle. If a lone player lands on the boss or any enemy space, he or she will take 6 turns. Actually, for the boss, if the player lands on the boss room space, he or she will take 6 turns to fight the boss alone. And on the double battle, if one player lands on one player lands to the next player that is already in the boss space room, he or she can join as a team. The player who was active the battle goes first to fight, then moves to the next battle. There will be 6 turns to battle the boss. And triple battle, if a player lands next to the other player and active the boss battle as well, it will do the same order like the double battle. There's also 6 turns. Unite battle. Once all 4 players are together, he or she must follow the same order, but in 1 turn. However, there's no movement for the players to roll the dice to move in the boss room. Once all players are in the room is officially locked until the boss is beaten. Team leader will lead the other players. Will eventually follow the official order of the turn. And then you got the ultimate battle. If the 5th player is at it, the team is full force to beat the boss. When the 5th player lands in the boss room space, he or she does the same order from the previous battle. However, once the turn is up, the team will take the lead along with the official order that was set in the agreement with the team. Now I added some game over rules just in case. If a player dies, he or she can be back in the game by using a relive spell or certain items. If the player dies in a monster or boss battle, he or she can start over from the home base and camping spot to earn levels and heal themselves. If one of the players no longer wants to play the game, he or she can be excused and rest, and the rest can continue by the same stats as long as he or she can contribute to keep the character sheet. Players must keep in mind that all stats and items in the inventory, such as weapon spells, key items, and level ups, are still intact until the players no longer wish to play. Units. Enemy will have a stats in the core booklet. Enemy stats will be in the core booklet that will provide a guide for the players. Certain enemies will have abilities, weaknesses, and experience points that any RPG would. And NPCs are the main support units in the game that provides shops and quests. NPCs are usually the green dots on the map, so if the player lands on it, can active an event. And from there, I will be demonstrating my demo video.